take me back to that moment. Like, what was the rock bottom like moment where you realized something had to change?
Well, so for me, the rock bottom was, yeah, it was when I remember the moment I was holding my newborn son in the hospital. His name was Austin, and I'm 19, and I failed out of high school, like you said, with a 0.9 GPA, which, by the way, you have to work really hard to do that poorly, right? Like, I didn't even get socially promoted. That was just, um, so I minimum wage job. My son's born, and you're just sitting there, and like, I realized the sort of epiphany for me was that it was one thing to screw up my own life, but now I have this innocent little child who didn't ask for this. And I knew I had to do something. I didn't know what yet. I just knew that whatever I was doing hadn't worked and wasn't working. And so I was like, okay, I just have to do something. And it's funny when people talk about their turnaround stories and things like that. Sometimes people, and I believe them, but they say like, well, as if they had this grand plan that they knew where they were going to go. I mean, I didn't. Like, I just knew I had no other choices. Right. I mean, it was just, here I am. I don't have skills. I have no money at all. And I know I need to do better and be better. And so it was really out of desperation that I started on a different path.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point because I relate to what you said. Is like, I had no real plan either when I was coming from rock bottom. And you'll hear people, it's like, oh, I just like sold my car. I moved to LA. I was walking on the beach, and then I met Wayne Dyer or something like that. And then my life like completely changed. And 99.9% of the time, it's the complete opposite. It's like it's just work and perseverance and resilience. And what I'm curious with you is, like, a lot of people in your situation would have stayed stuck in that story and that identity. I'm a dropout. I'm a failure. Like, what made you actually reject that part of you and rewrite your story?
There was a part of me that always felt like I felt like I had these dueling tensions inside me. Like, there was a narrative of I'm just a screw up, and that was like true at some level. But there was a part of me, and I think a lot of people watching or listening feel this way when they're at that moment, which is like there's still that small part of you inside that believes that you could be better, that there's something better for you. And it's so easy to slip into the victimization and just stay in that space. Because it's funny, even when it's bad for you, it's still an identity, right? It still creates consistency and predictability. And so for me, again, it was like I knew again, for my son, I was like, I have to be better. And it's funny that just I, it sounds like, oh, then I was better. It's like, no, it was a long process of getting better, falling down again, getting up, and just over and over again. And I realized there was a moment that when I thought about, well, then who am I? And I decided, this was before I really started turning around and decided to go to college, that I was going to be the person, like, you might be smarter than me, you might be stronger than me, you might be better than talented, whatever, but you're never going to outwork me, and I'm never going to quit. And I just decided that was going to be my who I was. I'm never going to quit. And it turns out you can get a really long way if you actually just persevere.
Yeah, so talk about that transformation with your education. You went from high school dropout, point 0.9 GPA, like essentially a failure, right, in high school. And then you decided to go back to college. Like, walk me through, like, how did you like reprogram your mind to like actually make it through that?
Well, it was interesting because so when I decided, okay, I've got to do something, and I didn't know what. And you know, I remember having this conversation with my father, and he was the first high school graduate and college graduate in our family. And he was a mechanic. And I remember one day when I was like I was probably like fourth or fifth grade, he came home and he was like, I think there's something more for me. And he decided he was going to go to college. I was like, okay. So he went to school at night and became a mechanical engineer. And he just retired a few years ago. And he invented so many airbags. This is what his profession was. He such a great contribution. So I watched what education did to change our lives and life circumstances. And, he told me, he said, look, the people around me were like, well, you're just lazy. And I was kind of internalizing that narrative. And he said, I don't think you're lazy. I just think you have to really love what you do. And then when you do, like, you're really good. And when you don't, you're not. And he said, look, I think there's plenty of things you can do for a living where you can make a good living with your skills. You just can't get there from here. And so he's like, you either need to start a business or go to college. And I had like negative $35 in my bank account and didn't know the first thing about business. So I was like, well, maybe I'll follow my dad's path and enroll. So I went to open enrollment school, Weber State University in Ogden, Utah. Our claim to fame is Dame Lillard went there, so this is good. But
You guys were a good Cinderella team in the NCAA, right?
phenomenal way back. That was so. By the way, that was when I was we upset North Carolina. It was one of the biggest upsets ever. That was when I was interviewing for grad school. It was awesome. So I was going around and people were like, "Oh, Weber State, of course." It's like, and I realized there's this beautiful halo effect where they're like, "It must be a good academic school." I'm like, I call it like the Gonzaga effect, right? Everyone's like, "Yeah, Gonzaga." You're like, we have no idea what kind of school that is, but yeah. So yeah, what I did was I said, okay, I had just enough money. My parents and stuff said cobble together just enough to help me we had enough for 1 year, which was only like $800 a term, so it was not expensive, but still we didn't have any money. And I got my GED, and they said, look, you're going to have to figure out how to make this work. You're going to have to be able to get a scholarship or some money if you want to stick around in this. And my dad told me, don't do this. Go to college if you really want to be there, but don't just mess around. Right. And so I was working during the day, going to school at night at first. And I realized early on that whatever I had tried before didn't work. And I think this is a really important lesson that has become part of my professional life too, which is we often think when you try something and you fail, it means you're not good at it. But in reality, for any task, there's always a wide range of strategies that can actually work. And the right strategy depends on your individuality, right? And so I just knew that there were certain things, whatever I was doing and trying to study like everybody else didn't work. And so I was started paying more attention to who I was. And I'll tell you a couple things, and I think this will resonate because you've written a lot of time, talk a lot about this, but like the environment itself. And it was like, because this was an open enrollment school, I would be in there with kids I went to school with, right? And I found myself whenever I was in a class with kids I'd gone to high school with, I felt this pull to be the old class clown, the kid that's not smart, and I realized, okay, for whatever reason, I just got to get out of that environment. So if I went into first week of class and there was someone I went to school with, I would just choose a different class. And then I realized there were certain kind of professors that I related to better than others, and I started choosing that. And slowly, I realized something really important, which was that I was starting to succeed when I created an environment that was a good fit to my individuality. And so, even in something like an open enrollment school in Ogden, Utah, there's still the ability to create that fit. Um, and I can tell you, just if you don't mind, I'll share probably the most important turning point in my whole life came. So, I was doing pretty well. It had been about a year in. I was getting A's, I was like, well, maybe we'll see I don't know what this is. I kept saying, well, that was an easy class, or whatever. But I didn't anything other than it's me. I'm actually pretty smart, that kind of thing. Um, and I'm sitting in a really big auditorium history class, which is not a good context for me, with my buddy Steve. And I started complaining about how bad this was, and he goes, "Oh, listen, it's nothing compared to what I got myself into in the honors program." And I was like, I don't even know what the honors program is. And he goes, look, there's no lectures. They're just small groups of like 10 to 12 people. He's like, there's no tests. You just write. And he goes, I don't even think there are right answers. All we do is argue all the time and debate. And I was like, wait. That's a thing? So I impulsively like bolted right up to the honors program. It was on the second floor of the library at the top of a hill. They had a whole floor. And I went right in and went to the secretary, a woman named Marilyn Diamond. And I said, oh, I want to be in the honors program. And she said, okay, let me get you in to see the director. So I get in. He's very excited. He sits me down. I'm sitting across his desk from him. He goes, okay, I'm really glad you're interested. We're really proud of this thing. He goes, just a couple of questions. What was your high school GPA? And I said, zero point 0.9. And this is no kidding. He goes, what point 0.9? Like I left off the most important part. I said, oh, 0.9. And he looked at me and, he was really kind. He wasn't rude, but he said, yeah, you can't be in the honors program. Right. And I was like, just humiliated. Right. I was like, I'm grabbing my stuff as fast as possible just to get out of there, go crawl in a hole. I apologized, thanked him for his time, grabbed my stuff, and I'm bolting out. Well, Marilyn Diamond's the secretary, her desk was right next to the door. And as I was bolting out, she reached out and grabbed my arm. And she said, hey, I overheard the conversation. If you want this, don't take no for an answer. And I was like, what, you could do that? Like, you can just not take no for an answer? Right. Like, and she said, sit on the couch over here and don't leave until I let you in. And so I did. And I was so nervous. Like, he came out and as it took about 3 hours go by. And finally he pulls me back in. He said, hey, I why do you want to be in the honors program? Like, because on paper it makes no sense. So I was explaining to him what I'd learned about the right environments for me and that I really thought this was a good environment. And so he decided to let me in on a provisional basis, one class at a time. Well, flash forward, 3 years later, I graduated as the honor student of the year with a 397 GPA and just got accepted to Harvard for my doctorate. And, I tell that story for two reasons. One is like, yeah, look, you can work really hard and you need to, but it's pretty remarkable how, like, when you are doing that and you have a good belief in yourself, the role that other people play in your life is incredible, right? Whether that's all the way up to mentors, which I've had plenty, but even these small things like Marilyn Diamond just giving me the right advice at the right time changed my life.
So let's take a step back for a second because a lot of people they would stay stuck in this like victim mindset and the failure stuff. And you talked about how you got rejected from the program. The point 0.9 GPA just came back to kind of haunt you in a way. But like, how did that shape you? Like, what life skills did having like a point 0.9 GPA and dropping out, like, how did that give you like something that a straight A student would never have?
So two things. One, I kind of mentioned before, the value of perseverance, where you just like push through the discipline to stick with it. I just feel like a lot of times when life is a little easier, you don't learn that lesson until it's too late, right? Life's just good enough. But the second thing is that so much, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but we all kind of pursue life in this sort of one size fits all approach. It's like, oh, that person's successful, just do what they did. And like, well, they're not you, right? And so I had to learn, like, out of grim necessity, like, what kind of study skills work for me? What kind of classes are good for me? Like, I became hyper focused on trying to get that fit right because it was, if I didn't, I was out of school. We didn't have any more money. And I was back to like literally the last job I did before going to college. I literally drove around and gave enemas for a living. Like that was a tough job. And I'm like, I do not want to go back to that. But like what's interesting is so even this idea of really getting a level of self-knowledge and understanding that you're trying to create that good fit has served me so well all the way through grad school into my professional life, where you realize you can do and accomplish things that other people can't because they're so stuck in either they have this super fixed mindset of like, well, I tried, I'm not good at it. So I don't do it, or they don't really know themselves well enough and they don't understand the role that strategy plays in being successful.
And you've turned your mess into your message, right? Like you've been able to, people always make fun of me. They're like, oh my God, you've been able to monetize your story. You know what I mean? So much. And I know obviously a lot of your work and what you talk about is like rooted in what you went through yourself. Do you think that's possible for everyone? Like, can everyone turn their pain into purpose, or do you think it just is very situation dependent?
I actually think you can. I really do, because I think that the pain to purpose part, and you've talked about this, right? The adversity reveals a lot. It just strips you bare, right? It's we build all these stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, Some of them aren't always positive, but a lot of them are protective in weird ways, right? Um, I'll give you one of the stories I used to tell myself before I turned it around, which is, you know, I was failing in school all the time, and people would tell me, "But you're so smart. If only you would try," as if it was just effort. But what they didn't realize is I was trying and it wasn't working. And what I found was that by accepting not trying, it actually gave me the illusion of control, right? The reason I failed was because I chose not to try. And there's something weird and there's like perverse incentive about still feeling like I had control over my life, even though the cost of that was colossal failure. But the truth is that even looking back now, it was never a good fit. And I didn't have the skills and knowledge to make it a good fit. So it wasn't going to work no matter how hard I tried. And so, these stories you tell yourself just they end up getting in the way in pretty profound ways if you don't get over them.
Yeah, and I think one of the traps that exists with the pain to purpose, because I totally agree with you, is that you'll hear people say, "Just follow what you're good, follow your passion, follow what you like." And it's like if that were true, I would have been a professional golfer because I love to golf, but I somehow always struggle to break 100. Right? Like, what's your thoughts on that whole idea?
Yeah, I'd be playing for the New England Patriots right now if this were the case. But yeah, listen, here's how you think about it. I think there's like two steps to this. And again, I'm speaking to the expert here, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But the to me, that first step is if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't like yourself, this idea that like following your passion, it doesn't really work. And first of all, we can talk about all the challenges there. There's work you have to do to develop a genuine belief in yourself before you can even set a direction and be able to accomplish something that will give you a sense of purpose. And that belief doesn't come from passion or motivation. It comes from actions. It comes from small things that you do that you pay off, right? That you start stacking these things. Like you got to start building, like your identity is going to come from your behavior, not your wish fulfillment. So like getting that belief. But then back to your point, like I think that it is certainly good to care about the things you do. You care, so do I, right? But the reality is that yeah, in a perfect world, you want to find something that you are good at, that you care about. So you want to call that passion or whatever, and that you can actually make a living doing. You know what I mean? And so the way I always think about it is go for those if you can get them. But at the end of the day, like don't follow your passion off a cliff. That doesn't work. Right. And so like you got to be good at something. And if you care about it, and then you're in really great shape. But it's a remarkable what you can care about if you actually get good at things.
Well, what's also remarkable is, in my years of hosting this show, it's been, I wouldn't say it's rare. That might be an overstatement, but it's not as common that people go like the normal trajectory in life and they're like, "Oh my God, this is how I became successful." It's always some flavor of unconventional stuff that happens in their life, whether it's like overcoming addiction or mental health stuff, or in your case with dropping out of high school. There's always something like wild that kind of gets thrown in the mix there that shapes them to be able to do all this cool stuff. Like, what's your message to people that maybe they haven't followed the American dream or the standard trajectory and they're trying to figure things out?
So first of all, once you let go of that idea that there's a one size fits all approach to living a good life, you're on the right path. In fact, I actually wrote a whole book about this called Dark Horse, where my original work when I was a professor was about human individuality and the science of that. Well, I had actually decided for fun to do this largest study ever of people who had these unconventional paths in life. I just thought, why not? It'd be fun. So it's called the Harvard Dark Horse Project. And me and a colleague, and we were just interested in all these people who were successful that no one saw coming. And I wondered, were they just like these idiosyncratic sort of one-off things that we can't learn anything from? Just wasn't true. What we quickly found was that we thought they were anomalies, but in reality, it really is more the norm. People who truly are successful, they really never just have a straight, narrow path, or rarely at least, right? And it almost always involves some kind of adversity that unlocks a part of them that they didn't know even exists. And once they get on a path of just following who they are, what they care about, what they want to contribute to the world, they end up being successful in ways that just are unbelievable.
Yeah, when it comes to adversity, I think the one of the hardest things people struggle with, and I'm using my own like, experience even in recent years when I've gone through something that was challenging to be like, okay, like why is this so hard for people? Like, what is? And it's how do you create separation in that near term, intense emotional fear and adversity to step back enough to see the bigger picture, which is really hard to do. In your experience, like what skills have you learned to be able to do that when you go through hard stuff?
Yeah, it's for me, and I kind of stumbled on it, right? Like, as you know, you're just trying to survive in that adversity, right? And trying not to sink into like this becoming your identity. But one of the things that I've learned is so much of the adversity. There's real adversity that is just straightforward, bad and awful, but so much of the pain we feel is actually in anticipation. It's in an it's not real or isn't necessarily real yet. So I found it was incredibly valuable in the moments of adversity to step back and give myself just a moment. What am I afraid of? Like what about this moment? And some of it's obvious, right? You lose someone you care about, things like that, but I'm talking about, you lose your job or something doesn't go right or a relationship. What is it? And then the thing I found, and for a long time I thought this was just kind of me being weird, but I think it's actually pretty useful in general because as your to your point about the environment mattering as well. Every time there's adversity, like it's kind of hard to know exactly the cause. Sometimes it's easy, right? This person did this to me. But so what I had to do was I started keeping a journal early on of bad things that happened to me and just describing it. And I found that it was actually in the patterns across the setbacks that started to reveal what my role in that was. And once I could see it, I could do something about it.
It's all about patterns, right? And I think once you develop like awareness around things, it makes things like so much easier to kind of like persevere through those moments. I think one of the other things that comes to mind too is a lack of patience, if you will, because you know you mentioned it wasn't like I just flipped on a switch and all of a sudden my life got better, and that's obviously the case with everyone that changes themselves. But so many people have a hard time. They're like, "Oh my gosh, like I need to feel better now. I need my life to get better now for me to be able to validate myself." How can you deal with that in between?
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, when you're especially rock bottom in particular, but any kind of adversity, it is that need for like, I want the quick fix. Well, there's not a quick fix. But here's the good news. If you just put in the work and you understand things you need to understand, boy, you'll be shocked at how fast it really does happen. I think we really do underestimate what's possible in the near term, right? And so, in a weird way, that obsession with the fix that's going to, and I'm great tomorrow, is like, no, that's going to keep you where you're at. And if you just, I personally never think too much about the long term destination because I think it's a silly idea. Like, wherever your life's going to take you, there's so many contingencies that you couldn't possibly anticipate. What you control is who you are, how you respond to events, these things. So I think you just realize that your life's gonna pass no matter what. In my case, I actually think of things in almost 7-year terms because it's long enough that you actually have to think a little bit, but short enough that's going to come up on you really quick. And for me, it was like, okay, I dropped out of school when I was 18. I went to by the time I was 25, I was actually a graduate student at Harvard, right? That 7 years was going to happen no matter what. And it's like, you can make it what you want, or you can just be a passive participant in your life. That's up to you.
It's so true, and I think that like I think in my own experience, embracing the journey can be challenging. And just knowing that it's just part of the process, part of the journey, even though like you want like certain things to happen quicker. Like, do you have, what's your advice for that?
Yeah, like again, you're not in charge of the timeline. Not really. You know what I mean? That once you accept that and you're just like, there's things I control, and if I control them, I'm gonna do something about them. And then let the chips fall where they may. And the time's gonna unfold. But what I think is funny, and if you can get to it, I don't know if you've had this experience, but you know, once you start getting a handle on things, then if you can allow yourself to actually appreciate the journey, it's hard because you want to be out of it. You want it to be better, but there's something really precious and interesting about the process itself. And I've come to just deeply appreciate it. Like you never want to be in adversity. Like that's not like listen, it's that, but that's just part of being human, right? And so it's like once you realize the adversity always teaches you something. Always. It reveals something about yourself you didn't know. It reveals something about the world that you didn't appreciate. Right. So there's an opportunity here to grow. And if you really lean into that, the first time you do it, it sucks because you have no real indication that it's going to pay off. But as you know, the more you stack the wins where you've gone from adversity, right, from pain to purpose, even in small ways, that starts to become part of your identity. I know it did for me to where I'm like, well, there's another setback, right? I didn't want to be here. Here I am, but I know how to do this. Like I would actually say I'm good at pain to purpose better than anything in my life. And there's something really I love the fact that like I went from not liking myself, not believing in myself to almost I have an almost irrational belief in my ability to figure anything out. Like it's I'm sure I can't, but like it sounds crazy. But if you told me right now, like in 6 months, you're gonna have to do open heart surgery, I'd be like, I'm sure I could figure it out. Like, which is silly, but like it's such a good orientation to life because it just feels like it doesn't matter what happens to you. I'm responsible for what comes next, and I've got it.
It's that back against the wall mentality, right? Like I totally agree with you and relate to that. And it can be a struggle, at least it has for me over the course of my life because I feel like I'm always like having to like outwork and get ahead. And sometimes things are just good, and I just gotta like learn to like smell the roses, if you no pun intended, right, with your last name, but to just chill and understand that you don't have to keep always pushing, pushing, pushing. That said, I think one of the misconceptions about even the name of my show is like the adversity advantage. Like, I don't think people should just, you know, forcefully go through adversity. Like it's more like, how can you find advantage when during life's hard times so that it doesn't ruin the rest of your life? Because it's not the near term battles that wreck people. It's the 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years of other bad habits that compound that lead to it's like the when somebody gets like divorced or something, like, oh my God, my divorce wrecked my life. And it's like, well, no, you drank a bottle of vodka every day for the next like 10 years, you know? So
That's exactly right. To your point, it's like it's it's funny. Viktor Frankl, right, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, talked a lot about this about the ability to find meaning in necessary suffering, and he made a clear point. Listen, if you keep putting yourself in that place, that's on you, right? There's no meaning in that. But so you shouldn't want. You're not seeking adversity, but recognizing it's part of the human condition, and that there's something that's revealed about your nature under stress that just simply can't be discovered under normal circumstances. And so it's funny. I think a bit like you. So I found that it's funny on the other side of it, like when you get a little bit addicted to growth, right? Where you're like, oh, hell yeah, I can do this, right? It does. You got to be careful not to be, hey, dude, the moment is right now and it's pretty great. Like, enjoy it. You know what I mean? So I actually literally had to, um, I had a, just to share with you, I haven't really talked much about it, but I've just gone through my last adversity that is 3 years ago, my wife passed away. She was my wife for 29 years. And boy, oh boy, you build a life. I mean, she was with, my high school sweetheart. We were, we got on that journey together, and you're like, what the hell am I going to do? Right. Like you're just world shatters. And you're like, I realized I had no idea who I was independent of that relationship. And so the journey of figuring out who you are again, and, it really for me has clarified something that I think has become a real advantage for me, which is what do I want out of life really? Like what really matters? And what are my priorities? Because you can be successful as you want professionally, but if your family's falling apart and you've got no faith, no family, no friends, like good for you. You're famous. But it led me to come up with a set of criteria for how I was going to make choices about my life moving forward, and it's really paid off already.
what happened to your wife?
she developed adult onset seizures that led to seizure induced psychosis. So she ended up just like actually being in a state of psychosis and ended up taking her own life in that state. So it was pretty rough. But again, it's like I'm very grateful. Like obviously, I wish that would never have happened. Just like any adversity, you wish it would. But again, you just look at yourself and say, "Here you are." Right? You can let it destroy you, or you can let it reveal for you the things that you need to work on and grow from.
There's a lot of people that are dealing with grief right now. Um, like, what was the biggest thing that helped you kind of move through that in a way that was productive?
Yeah. For me, especially with profound grief, your entire world you just becomes unmoored. Like you just don't know. And I found that the first step for me was to create patterns again in my life. Like because everything now is just blown up, and I needed the patterns and regularity, right? The predictable patterns that allowed me to be able to focus on certain things but not have to worry, like basic things like how am I going to eat, what do I do, how do I order food, like there's stuff that we divided labor on that now I'm in charge of everything, and just getting those things in place. But it's I think, for me it was like, again, we're back to with that profound grief. I found the most valuable thing that I did is I called it stepping on all the landmines as fast as possible. Because your point about like what tends to wreck you isn't the adversity, but the bad habits and other things you develop in response to it, right? Like they're coping mechanisms, they're whatever. But like then 5, 10 years down the road, those are the things that are actually holding you back. And it's so much more complicated to actually undo that tangled web then than it is to actually recognize it up front. um, and so for me, it was like I found myself wanting to avoid the places and things that we had done together, right? Literally like our favorite restaurant or going for a walk in the woods behind our house and things like that. And I was like, nope, I'm not letting that become almost like a phobia. And so I just would make myself and then everybody said, well, the first year everything is really hard. And that's true. But what I found is I found myself in a reaction feeling like I making it a bigger deal than it should be. So I leaned in the other way. So like the first Christmas, we call it Super Christmas, and I had my godchildren and all the little people that come over, and we're going to just blow the doors off of this, right? And so every holiday we went the other way in this, and yeah, I think grief there we all respond differently, but the thing I can say for sure when your adversity is grief, it can be so consuming. And the third thing, if you don't mind, I'll just share. I had a really good friend call me just a about a week and a half after my wife passed, and he said, "Look, you're going through hell right now, but I need you to do me a favor. I need you to pay attention to all the ways that the people around you show you they love you right now, the way they show up." And then he said, and this is the hard part, I need you to feel the gratitude. That was such a remarkable piece of advice because it's when you're going through grief, adversity as grief, it feels like you're the only person in the world, right? Like this is happening to me. Gratitude is expansive, right? Gratitude opens you up as you're feeling closed off. It was the most valuable advice anyone's ever given me. Like it really led me to feel the love. But what I realized is you actually have to make yourself feel the gratitude. It does not automatically flow, right? It's something you have to lean into.
And so you went through these 2 massive adversities. One was your fault and the other was not your fault. Your fault meaning like the high school dropout situation, and then not your fault. Like what was different about those 2 as far as the way you saw them, and like which one was harder for you to bounce back from?
So, in some ways, knowing it's your fault is easier, right? Like, it's like, well, I'm causing most of my own problems. So, if I can figure this out, I could not cause problems for myself. when it happens to you and you didn't want it to happen and you didn't do anything to make it happen, it's its own kind of adversity that is weird because you're like, what do I do? Right? Like I'm just experiencing this. So it's not as simple as I can change X or Y and it all is better. Well, it won't all be better, right? And so what I learned is that I wasn't solving a problem then. I was going to say, okay, well, I still have decades left of my life, hopefully. I want to live a full life. What do I need to know now? What is this teaching me? Like, for example, I was surprised at how hard it was to be alone. Just never thought of myself as someone that that would be hard for. It was like, yeah, you've been with one person for 29 years, like married for 29 years. Like, of course. And so just really, I read everything I could on the grief process. Uh, I tried to start implementing things that I could do. I did find that becoming productive again, like setting small goals and achieving them, keeping some forward momentum, because it's also really weird. I'll tell you, there's like it's I don't know what the right word is, but it was like you could fall into this a victim that's not your fault, right? You're the actual victim. This happened. You was like, poor you. You get a lot of attention for that. And it's actually kind of I could feel myself feeling like how quickly that could become part of my identity if I'm not careful, because you get a lot of attention and it's like, but I'm not earning it. I didn't contribute it. I'm not getting attention because of something I'm adding value to people's lives. It's just because something happened to me. And so the good news for me was that I do think that my experience dealing with adversity early in life and watching it pay off if you put the time and effort in, made me feel like, okay, well, this happened to me. I can't undo it, um, but I can move forward. And how do I do that? And I'm really grateful for that mindset.
That validation trap is hard for people when you're going through something or something happens and you just tell people your story, and of course it's sad. So then you get used to that. It's almost like an addiction because of like the brain response you get from all that, good attention. Yeah.
I mean, hit man. Well, it's what's really funny about that is I also experienced that. So, for 12 years after I graduated from Harvard, I was a professor there, right? And it was fun to be like one of the youngest professors, and like, because you're so smart, and you go anywhere in the world, and it's like you're a Harvard professor, like, well, you must be smart, right? And so for someone whose identity was you're kind of dumb before, boy, that's validating. And there was you know, several years ago, I knew that I didn't believe in higher education as it was structured. I actually think it's a silly, silly game of like it's more like the Louis Vuitton model of opportunity, right? We're gonna have this fake, we're gonna charge people a lot of money. We're not really teaching them much. They get a diploma, and the fancier name opens opportunities. I just didn't believe in that. I believe in everyone's has something to contribute, and we should have not these ridiculously selective things. We should be trying to educate as many people as possible. And then so I was like, well, maybe I want to start my own thing. And it was like the validation trap of like, wait, but then who would I be if I'm not a Harvard professor? Right. Like, and I was like, dang, this is so like hard. And so but I knew that if I'm gonna tell other people to pursue these kind of paths, I can't be a hypocrite, right? And so even just it's like funny that you can find validation in your adversity, but also when you're successful. And so I think this idea of avoiding the validation trap is one of those universals that is true no matter where you are in your life right now.
Yeah, and I think that what so I guess before I ask my next question, was there ever a level of like cognitive dissonance with you with the way you saw yourself, your identity as a high school dropout versus being a professor at Harvard?
Yeah. What I liked about it is I decided that I would just break the stereotypes. It was a lot of fun, right? It was like, listen, now everybody thinks you're smart. Now I'll just be myself. And people are like, wow, you don't act like a Harvard professor. I'm like, well, thank you. Like, this is just me, right? Like, I take that as a huge compliment. But it's the dissonance really came more for me uh, when I knew that I didn't believe in this way these institutions were structured, and yet I was still staying because it was benefiting me. And that created more distance. And I'll tell you, there was something similar. Uh, if I go back to before I decided to go to college, there was this interesting moment. Um, I didn't like myself, didn't believe in myself. I put on a good front, right? Like we all do, right? Cocky or whatever, but like, and I was working at Circuit City, which they don't exist anymore, but like, and I had no money at lunchtime, so I just went over to the Barnes and Noble across the street. Had no money, couldn't buy the books, but I just sit there in the self help section, and I stumbled on a book called The Six Pillars of Self Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, and the early in the book, he said, people ought like self esteem is not something that you can actively work on, right? It's a consequence, right? Just like self belief, and you talk about self belief is actually a consequence of your actions, right? Like you can't talk yourself into believing yourself. Well, you can't like or respect yourself just by looking in the mirror and telling yourself you're good enough or smart enough. But one of the really profound insights for me was he said people automatically think like real self esteem is when your beliefs and your behaviors are aligned. And the aha for me was he said people automatically assume when it's not aligned that it's their behaviors that are wrong, but it could be that you don't believe what you think you believe. And that was blew my mind because for me it was like religious in nature in my upbringing, and I thought, wait a minute, there are all these behaviors. They weren't bad behaviors, but they were inconsistent with what I thought I believed, and so I didn't respect myself. So, but then I realized, wait a minute, what do I believe? And that was so profound for me in realizing, oh, I need to, part of this is need to rethink what I actually believe in order to align to my behaviors, not necessarily the other way around.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is your whole kind of dark horse mentality kind of I'm sure you had to face that when your wife passed. Because here you are, like your life you thought was supposed to go this way, and you're supposed to, have more kids and grandkids and all the things with this person, and then all of a sudden something very sad and unfair happens. How did your work help you through that time, if at all?
Yeah. It's a couple of things. One, my belief in my own journey and my own self, and not there's nobody else is living my life, so I have to figure it out, was quite helpful. Again, is like read widely, try to understand it, but then I need to create a path for myself. And the second thing is, again, like it's funny, and not just because it's your show, but like the adversity advantage. That's true even when it's adversity that you would give anything to undo. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean advantage doesn't necessarily mean it is better than what was before, right? Like that's not the promise. It's that if you actually sit with the adversity, even the profound loss and stuff like that, it's it's revealing, and it'll help you learn things about yourself that you just wouldn't learn otherwise. And again, I would undo that loss in a heartbeat if I could, but I can't. And so accepting that and accepting my responsibility for what comes next in my life has been really important.
Shifting gears a bit, you've talked about like the importance of who you spend time with. I talk about it a lot as well. I think sometimes people don't take it as seriously as they should. Talk about like your perspective on why people should really pay attention to that.
Well, so here's what's interesting. Um, I learned it initially through dumb luck, right? Just trying to get through school and realizing, wow, I perform differently in these environments, or I don't feel as good in this. But in my early scientific work, I was focused on what's called the science of individuality. So it's actually the methods that allow you to do personalized medicine, personalized nutrition. We're just unique as individuals, and so treating people as averages is really, really bad. And the the what was so fascinating for me is this understanding in the science of individuality, and I wrote about it in another book I wrote called End of Average. It's called if then signatures. It turns out you cannot understand behavior, learning, performance independent of the environment that the person's in. You just can't. And so we've developed methodologies that can actually understand person in context. And it turns out that like once you recognize that, like you realize you have a lot more control over things than you realize. And the key part about most environments are actually other people and their expectations. And so I think it's funny when someone says, listen, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop doing drugs. I'm going to stop whatever it is. Um, and then yet they fall back into the exact same peer groups, the exact same physical environments. And then they're shocked when their behavioral patterns are end up exactly the same. And, um, I had a really interesting, my dad taught me this lesson. Uh, my, you know, I was one of the things I struggled with early was I was pretty impulsive with money. Actually, I had no money. I was impulsive using credit cards to spend money I didn't have, right? And I kept saying, you know what? Oh, I'll be better. It's just self control, right? And so I'd open another credit card, and sure enough, I'd charge it all the way its limit, and then I'd be like, well, shoot, right? And I kept thinking again, it would be about self control. This time, I'll do it. My dad told me so. My grandfather, his father, um, was an alcoholic from many times in his life, and he would get sober, and he kept telling my dad, he'd say, "Okay, well, I'm coming home from the shop," and he'd drive past the bar on his way home just to prove that he was in control. And my dad said, "Yeah." He said, "But, you know, it was only a matter of time before he would eventually stop, and then the whole cycle would start again." And my dad told me, he said, "It seemed to me that a real man would learn not to drive past the bar." Right? Like, and I thought, okay. So I actually didn't have a credit card until I was literally till I was through graduate school. It was so funny because I used debit cards because then if I spent the money, I felt the pain immediately. Right. And so when you realize that the environment matters so much more than you think, also recognize that you're not a passive participant in that environment. You can shape that environment far more than you realize. And it does begin with the people that you're around because they outside of your own effort, they're going to have the biggest effect on where your life goes.
Yeah, man, it's so true. Like, I think that like your environment creates this false sense of normalcy. I know in my experience, like my friends back in the day were not bad people, but they were making these decisions that just weren't in line with where I wanted to go or where I needed to go in my life, I should say. And because of that, before I changed, I thought everything that I was doing was normal because everyone around me was doing it. And then when you kind of step out a bit, you realize how abnormal some of that stuff was. And then you develop this new sense of normalcy.
I agree. And here's a tip that worked for me when because it's sort of easier said than done when you want to reshape those interpersonal environments, right? Because these are friends, we all want to belong. And so we often think, well, okay, well, then I just won't hang out with these people. It's like, yeah, but you also do have to have other things, right? No one wants to go from having, yeah, like you said, they're not bad people. They might be making decisions or doing things that are actually not terribly good for you if you fall into it, but it doesn't mean they're bad people. But here's the thing, if you start by you don't have to necessarily just jettison all of it. You should probably over time, but start branching out just a little bit. Like I always think about like a rule of three. Like if you don't have three meaningful groups that you belong to, then those groups can become almost cult like in their power over you, right? If you just have one group that you belong to and care about, well, their expectations, their patterns become your patterns, your expectations. But just kind of branch out a little. And it doesn't have to be huge, right? Like, so you've got a group that's not working. Well, like go sign up for something in your community, just get out around other people. And I think that's a nice next step into this. And what you'll find pretty quickly is much easier to let go of the groups that are actually not good for you at all when you start to see that you already have alternatives.
You've mentioned, a variety of people in this episode that have inspired you or believed in you. Like, who's the one person that really believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself?
I'm really, really lucky that my whole story could be told through the lens of a handful of people where that's been true. Um, the obvious thing is my parents have always been great, but I'm going to skip that because that's an easy answer. I'm going to tell you one example that where it's just like people can say they believe in you, talk's cheap. It's when do they show up? What do they do? When I was in yeah, at Weber State and I was halfway through, I had an advisor named Bill McVaugh, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, I think you have what it takes to go to graduate school." Well, I literally didn't know anyone had ever gone to graduate school. So I don't know if that's true, but he was someone who did and he believed in me. But here's what's great. He said, "Look, but for you to get there, you're going to have to be here full time, right? You're going to need to do some research on campus. There's things you'll need to do, but that would mean quitting your job." And I was like, "But I have 2 kids at this point and I'm barely getting by." And so we were looking at possible opportunities on campus that could maybe supplement to make it happen. When all of a sudden I got this notification from the psychology department that there was this new position open, and they were paying literally just enough what I needed to be able to quit my job. I had to do a few other things, but this was amazing. And I was like, this is like the greatest thing that's ever happened. I can't believe it. It's like a miracle. Only at Bill McVaugh's, he passed a decade or so ago, did I find out that he had actually gone to the department head and offered to teach a 5th class for basically, and then gave the money back to the department to hire me, but he didn't want me to know that he's the one that did it. I mean, I I I would not have got into graduate school without doing what he said, and I couldn't have done it without that kind of sacrifice. So when I think about that, and you think about, especially when you're not so sure of yourself yet, it's okay to see yourself through the eyes of people you respect, right? I didn't know for sure whether I was capable of what he was saying, but he did. And I thought maybe I should just take on that for a minute, see how Bill sees me, right? Rather than I see myself, and use that as bootstrapping into that. And so, like, those kind of things, I feel so grateful that, first of all, that we live in a country where second chances are possible. I'm really grateful for that. And that I've had people in my life who have shown up and believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself.
And I will say, like, second chances are celebrated, man. Like, it's like they're always rooting for the underdog. You'd be surprised. I found that it's more once you become really successful, like people kind of try and chop you down
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
It's not when you're like at the bottom. People are like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Like, because then it's like, I feel like that people's egos aren't in the way. 'Cause it's like, oh, well, I can still cheer for them. Yeah. Cause they're not as good as me.
Well, it's funny you say that too. Is I will say one of the things that, if someone right now is like going through adversity, maybe even in rock bottom, and they're now like, you know what? I've listened to what Doug said. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take responsibility. Here's a sneaky, and I'll tell you why this is true. But I think one of those things that will surprise you on your path is that there will be people who celebrate you, right? But actually, people really, really like you staying as you are, because it's not because even the people that say you should change, because it's predictable, right? Are like the single biggest motivator for the human brain is certainty. Your brain craves certainty. Uncertainty means death, right? So certainty. So even the screw up in your environment that you keep saying should change, well, when they start changing their behaviors and they start breaking the pattern, people act a little weird about it. So don't be surprised if like your effort to change doesn't necessarily immediately get the response from people that you might want. And then, like you said, it's so funny. It's like people cheer the underdog, they cheer the second chances. Boy, they love to knock you down when you succeed. But for me, that the lesson of all of that, because you and I have both been there, right? We've been at the bottom in our respective ways, and we've been to the top in our respective ways. Is the through line for all of it is you got to care about people, but you can't care what they expect of you. Like they can't care what they think. As soon as you start falling for, I'm living my life for the adoration or the applause or whatever it is, right? Like you're completely screwed. And that's true when you're successful, but it's equally true when you're down on your luck and trying to turn it around.
Yeah. It's super interesting. When I started my podcast, there were certain people, most people have been super supportive of me no matter what, but there were certain people at the beginning that were like, "Good for you, that's awesome, amazing." And then once I started, they're like, "Oh, he's a podcaster, like, an influencer." You know what I mean? Like making fun of me almost. And it's like, wait, like, now that I actually have some success, now you're making fun of me, and not when I had like 3 people listening to my podcast. You know what I mean?
It's a good it reveals who your real friends are really quickly. It's like I said, I love it. It's like, as long as I don't see you as a threat, to how I see myself, then I'm gonna cheer you on, and I'm a good person for cheering you on. And wait a minute, now Doug's he's got a lot of followers. He's got a lot of people watching and listening. Like, and it's like, oh, that threatens my view of myself. I'm supposed to be the one, right? I'm supposed to be the in our friend group. I'm the one that's successful. And now here's Doug trying to take the knock me off the hill. So it's just funny. And you just have to, again, it's like, if you understand that about human nature, right? We could be a little forgiving of that. Just don't tie your self-worth to their to what they think of you. It's easy. I know it sounds like duh, but like, it is one of those things that it's, especially when you don't haven't liked yourself before, you know, this stuff. When you start being proud of who you are and people start to respond to that, you can get really, really addicted to their affirmation. And there's nothing wrong with being affirmed, nothing at all. You just can't chase it. It can't be your goal.
So bringing this all back full circle, if any, what advice would you give to like that high school dropout? Like at that moment, like what would you tell them?
It would be the same thing I'd tell someone who's 50 years old right now. It's literally never too late. It just isn't. It's like, it can feel like it, right? It really can. And at least when high school dropout, you're like, well, I've got my whole life ahead of me. Um, Listen, I've lived this, but I've studied this for a living. It is shocking how fast your life can become something worth living if you don't get if you're honest with yourself, you take responsibility, you don't want to be a victim, and you actually start paying attention. I don't mean to say it again nice because I'm on your podcast, but these kind of useful insights from folks like you, right? That because, and I think it's important. Like, people can have good insights just knowing it, like academically, but there's something really valuable when someone's lived it as well, right? Because there's a nuance and a subtlety to that lived experience, which I believe is where all their useful insights really come from. Because everything else ends up being sort of like one size fits all averaged insights about how you do X, Y, and Z, just not that helpful. So I think that, like, it sucks where you're at right now. Like, let's just be clear. And when we say adversity, like, I don't know anyone who actually seeks it out, who wants it, who's healthy. That's not good. But here you are, and I promise you, like, if you just put your head down and do the work, like, you're going to be shocked at who you can become. And the reality is we need you, right? Like, everybody's got something to contribute. The world's got a lot of problems. We want you being your best self. Good for you and good for us.
Todd, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been an incredible conversation.
Thanks for having me, man.